He's basically implementing a TOC concept in his plant, which propels him into great results, as you all remember when you read the book. Let's review the 4 intuitive actions that he took in order to reach such a thing. You remember that the bottleneck at his plant was the NCX-10. And he said, when he assembled with his people, let's make sure that NCX-10 has enough work to avoid starving. It should not stop because it's a bottleneck. It should constantly work. By the way, in the movie this becomes extremely clear. Then he's assembling again his people and talking to the lady that releases the material, and they conclude that they have to do it. They have to release the material so it arrives before the NCX-10 ahead of time. So again, that the NCX-10 doesn't have to wait. She has to get the parts from the vendors. But what is then the conclusion, very clear, is that, hey, wait a minute, the NCX-10 is working on things it should not be working. We don't want to waste this time, so let's make sure it works on the things that it should be working. Don't send anything that is not needed. Very intuitive. Many people implemented this throughout the world, and they got the same results, amazing results. And the gap was very clear. To the extent that 20 years later, Ellie was forced by reality to put this in writing. Because this became, oh, this is just a tactical thing, this is an operational thing. Improvement on TOC means let's do things on an operational basis. At the strategy level, no way. This is something else. We have to take care of all the things. He says, what are you talking about? And that's when he created, because we saw that in the implementations, it was not happening, the structure of the S&T. The strategy and the tactics. You may already all know it. I will just review it quickly. I'm putting it here very simple. Of course, there's no my intention to come in here and explain this again. So basically, he says for every strategy there's a tactic, but we have to understand what it means. If we are going into the scientific process, we have to move from the correlation to cause and effect. And the difference between the two is answering the question why. So every element has to be clear of why we have it. Of course, he goes further and says, what is a strategy? He answers a question. He says, everything that answers the question what, or what for, is for me a strategy. And how to do that is a tactic. And in between, we have to put a clear explanation of why we claim it. So from the conventional view, which is on the correlation world, there's a strategy that someone decides. There are a set of tactics. Nobody explains how they are connected. He moves into the TOC view, showing that there's a very logical map to implement it. If every action is there to reach a strategy, that means that every strategy has also an action or a set of actions. No matter in which level we are, there's always this combination of strategy and tactic. And of course, we have to answer why. Why is it there? Now let's take the S&T tree. One of the templates, and the one I chose was the RRR. And see how does this one relate to what we just saw in the movie of the goal or what is expressed in the book of the goal. Because here's where the gap starts. It seems to me that after 20 years of being involved with several TOC applications, of selling all these materials to the world, I still get the answer from the market. Oh, yeah, we are implementing TOC. we have implemented the solution for production. Oh, I know all about CCPM. They don't get it. They don't get it. And for that, as you can see, there are several levels. I'm going to level 5 of the RRR. You all know the structure of the S&T, right? So let's go down to the very, very low level. And let's take the first element. The first element coming from the goal. We said, that intuitively Alex has said, let's ensure that the NCX-10 has enough work to avoid starving. Guess what? The strategy of 5.11.1 is exactly that. The company has appropriate production buffers. Look at the necessary assumption. Having a production time buffer which is too short or too long results in chaos and jeopardizes due date performance. If the buffer is too short, there's not enough time and expediting increases. If the buffer is too long, there's too much inventory, priorities are masked, and the lead time is unnecessarily increased. This is explaining Alex Rogo situation at the goal, at his plant. Basically, and the S&T does a beautiful job explaining it, says from one hand side, if you don't have enough buffer, then there's insufficient reaction time. We cannot make sure that we have the things ready when we need them. But reality is that because of that, and the cost world mentality, we tend to jam things into the plant, send as much as we can, everybody should be busy, and chaos increases. If we take into consideration the normal disruptions, we have a curve that looks about like this. Today, all plants are full of material, like Alex's plant, and the S&T is saying, wait a minute, make sure you have just enough to keep the plant running, don't jam it, let's go to half of it. That would be enough buffer size. The end result is that the company has the right buffer. Exactly the first intuitive step that Alex took in the goal. What about the second? Release material so that if it arrives before the NCX ahead of time. And guess what? We go to 5.11.2. The release of work is scheduled in accordance with the set buffers. I'm not going to read all of this. You have it. I'm sure that several people have read it to you, or will read it to you, or you can read it. That's not the objective of this. What about the third one? Make sure the CNX10 is working based on what we need. And yes, you are concluding the same thing. 5.11.3. The release schedule is effectively followed and complied with. There's no difference. Look what the tactic says. An explanation is given to the first operations personnel of what is going to be expected, the expected effect on their work when the new release schedule is implemented. Orders are released strictly according to the established schedule. Nothing is released ahead of the schedule. And if you remember, this is exactly what Alex had to do in the goal. He had to explain it to his people, why this has to happen. And this is also the reason why material like this one is so critical. Because when we are implementing, we have to communicate this. We have to show what we mean. And this is exactly the point. The last one, do not send anything that is not needed. 5.11.4. The shop floor is only on orders that have to be filled within a predefined horizon. There's a one-to-one on what was released 25 years ago and what is written today in an S&T tree that was built 5 years ago. Why is this so important? Because based on this logic, the structure is saying that once you have all the elements down there, you are actually having this one, choking the release. Let's read it. The shop floor is populated only with orders that have to be filled within a predefined horizon. For each product family, I'm now on the tactic. For each product family, a buffer time is said to be equal 50% of the current lead time. Orders are released to the shop floor, to the floor-only buffer time before their committed due date. Excessive VIP is frozen until its time arrives, according to the above rule. Sales people are forbidden from using the shorter lead times to get more sales. And there's already a hint of what is starting to be missed when we talk about TOC applications and immunizing the future of a company. Because this was exactly the concept that three great men told the world. Started with Henry Ford. You all know about the production lines. He did exactly that. He ensured that whatever we were working on was exactly what we needed to work on, no more and no less. And then Taiichi Ono with the Toyota production system, the base for lean today. Again, he focused and made sure that the most important thing was flow. And of course, Goldratt with what we all know. All based on the concept of flow. And here we have to recognize that we are talking about production concepts that then convert into production applications. And probably we are moving only on production applications, forgetting the reason of the concept. So let's have a chat with Eli. Let's have Eli present to what he wrote in this, and Christoph already made reference to it, standing on the shoulders of giants, and referring exactly to this point on his view on flow.
That I consider the biggest genius in industry, in operations at least, which is Dr. Ono. The one that have not just invented, but implemented the Toyota production system. The one that all of Lean came out of it. And what I have tried to show in that article is that they followed rigorously the four elements, the four basic steps of flow. The first one is that improving flow is the main objective of production. Exactly like we said before. The second one is that in order to go about it, not just give it lip service, you have to establish a mechanism and to implement a mechanism that prevents overproduction. Yes, flow lines are so effective not because there are conveyor belts, but because there is limited space in front and after every work center in a line. And if this in a line a work center filled up the space after it, and he continues to produce and spill it on the floor, nobody regards it as effective. In other words, the real thing there is don't produce when it's not needed. Same thing is definitely for the Kanban system. You don't have a Kanban card, you may be a very expensive worker working on a very expensive machine, but if you don't have a card, you are not allowed to produce. These are the mechanism to prevent overproduction. That's the first step, because otherwise the flow is populated with so many things that shouldn't be there. And then improving the flow does not help the company, it just improves and enable us to do faster the things that we shouldn't do in the first place. What we've done so far is we actually implemented the mechanism that prevents overproduction. Haven't you noticed? We've established what the levels that we need from finished goods, and we are making sure that only those levels will be maintained, no more. And in order to enable that, we have to condemn local efficiencies, because otherwise what will happen? Now that we have excess capacity, even if the inventories are appropriate, even if we have reached all the levels that we wanted to reach in finished goods, since we do have people which don't have what to do all the time, we will make sure that they are working. In other words, we will violate the basic rule of flow. But then comes the fourth element. And the fourth element is, now that you prevented the overproduction, you have to balance the flow. In other words, you have to concentrate to take all the disruptions that slow down the flow. Only then. You see, this is one of the problems of theory of constraints. Practical problems. When Ford have put his rules of preventing overproduction by limiting the space, or when Ono have put his rules of preventing overproduction by limiting the amount of inventory per product that is allowed to accumulate between each two work centers through the Kanban system, the immediate result of these actions was that the total output of the company, the throughput, went down. And that's why there was no choice but to continue immediately to start to improve the flow by addressing the local processes. The problem of TOC is that the mechanisms that we are using to prevent overproduction, rather than reducing the throughput of the company, of increasing it dramatically while reducing the inventories. And because of it, there is a tendency to think that we've finished, that it's okay, that we've already got all the improvements. No way. We do have to continue, exactly like Ford and Ono have done. We have to continue to deal now with the local disturbances in order to improve things by another order of magnitude. That's imperative. But this does not mean that we have to deal with every disruption, because there are so many disruptions, there are so many things that can be corrected. The question is to build the mechanism that prioritize which disruption should be dealt with. You know what will happen otherwise. What disruptions are we going to deal with? Not the ones that it's important to take out, but the ones that we know how. Grave mistake. In lines, it's so obvious what to deal with. Because if one work center in the line stops, very soon the whole line stops. In Kanban, in just-in-time or lean Toyota production system, Ono had to establish a whole mechanism in order to guide where should the disruption be dealt with. The whole mechanism known as by reducing the number of Kanbans and then reducing the number of items per container, where he put the target to be one-piece flow. We have to establish now the mechanism that will tell us where to concentrate on on which disruptions we have to eliminate. That's what is standing now in front of our eyes.
You can already see the frustration even there when he says the practical problem of TOC is that once we implement this, we get results. So what? We have implemented all of this. Who asked the question, why are we implementing the TOC application? Yes, Eli just presented the three elements that are down here in order to reach the other one. And now the SMT is saying it clearly. And the SMT is saying the company has very high due date performance, over 99%. That's why we are doing it. We are doing all of this to have a very high due date performance. Of course, it says then how to achieve it, implement DBR and buffer management. But are we asking ourselves, why are we doing it? Not when we are using an SMT to implement it. Because when we are using an SMT to implement, then this problem doesn't exist. My problem is when we are only implementing the TOC application itself. Do we understand why are we doing it? The SMT is being very clear about it. And here's when immunizing the company for the future comes into play. On the road, all we are doing is looking at the timeline from the moment the customer gives us an order to the point when we collect the cash. And we're reducing that timeline. Eli says, to immunize our company against the future, we must expand ONO's approach in both directions. We must use it beyond the customer who pays the cash, all the way to the end consumer. And we must start much earlier in the process. We must extend ONO's approach to cover the process of getting the orders in the first place. How? And Christoph also already mentioned this. There are two professors that wrote this great book, Blue Ocean Strategy. And they claim that most of the companies, and we see it in reality actually, are in the red ocean, as explained by Christoph. The competition and the way they are operating is biting themselves, and the red comes from the blood that they are leaving behind it. But they also claim that it is possible not to be in a red ocean, but to be in a blue ocean. They show that about, I think it's 30 companies, which they document, reach this. They're in an environment in which competition plays no role. Of course, they are also saying that they are not, because they're honest, that those that have made it to carve a blue ocean were not the first ones. There were many before them. And all of them failed. And they failed because they didn't understand exactly how to communicate to the market. And every time someone intended it, they learned from the mistakes of the other one. What I find amazing, by the way, this book was written in 2005. They're already showing evidence of what Eli in 84 was writing about. Because if you remember, the goal does not stop of implementing the solutions in production. Alex has to go to corporate and he finds a friend in sales and does take action in order to increase sales. Not just to improve the cost or just to be able to have a good due date performance. He uses his improved due date performance in order to get more sales. 84. Eli's already shouting about it. In 99, he's even going further and showing Once again, they don't get it, so I need to say it out loud. Doing the Goldratt satellite program, I don't know how many of you have heard about the Goldratt satellite program. Can I see a raise of hands how many know about the Goldratt satellite program? Okay, just a few. This was an initiative in 1999. Eli sent out he had 8 sessions. At that time, internet was not exactly the best, so he had to use a whole satellite system so that everybody in different countries around the world could get the message. These were sessions of about 2 hours each. The last session is called Strategy and Tactics, by the way, and that's where the name comes from, Goldratt Satellite Program, because it was aired. And today it exists as a video. So let's see what he's already saying in 1999 about immunizing the future of the company. And what is the relationship between the TOC applications and immunizing the future of the company?
The direction of the solution is how to guarantee that always, no matter what, we do have more market. Shall we find out how to do it? Because it doesn't look simple, and it isn't simple. But here I'm not talking about who knows what vision. I'm talking about what is necessary, the absolute necessary things that we have to meet. Shall we continue to find out how are we going to go about devising such a strategy that will help us no matter what's our company, no matter what the market is? Yes or no? Anybody's interested? To what to change? I would like to draw your attention to the tree, logical tree, that I wrote about it, because most of it is quite simple but daring at the same time. So please open in page 185 or 86, depends on which book you have. Don't worry, I haven't jumped pages. I'm going, as I'm continuing to say the tree, I'm going to refer to them in details. Okay? This is probably the most concise and comprehending tree that I ever wrote. 3 small pages include all the strategy. So pay attention because it's not simple. Let's start with 105. 105, everybody sees it? Fine. Okay? Here is a statement that by now I hope that you will agree with me, even though most people when I start without these 7 sessions before are quite reluctant. What's written here is a statement about reality that I believe is correct. Options, service level, guarantees, response times, etc. can change market perception of value of the same physical product or service. Do you agree? As a matter of fact, even though most people think that in order to change perception of value, the key is engineering, let's come up with a new gizmo, some brilliant new product. Most companies, successful and big companies, have 0 technological advantage over their competitors. Show me the technological advantage of McDonald's, hamburgers. Not a good company for you. Do you know what inventory turns McDonald's have? About 190 per year, which means if you are going to McDonald's and buy a hamburger, most probably this hamburger was moving yesterday. McDonald's is opening, according to their formal numbers, 3 new shops a day, 365 days a year. Constantly for the last 3 or 4 years by now. What technological advantage do they have? that their competitors don't. Okay, let's take another company, a real high-tech company, Microsoft. Does Microsoft have some huge technological advantage that their competitors don't? Everybody knows that that's not the case. They became the 500-kilogram gorilla because of what's written here. If you look around, you'll find out most companies are getting their perception of value in the market, not through the uniqueness of their product, but the uniqueness of their offering. Can we take it as a given? As a matter of fact, the examples that we have used in session number 5 and 6 for the marketing and sales was not based on a new product. It was based exactly on that. All the examples that I've used in It's Not Luck are once again based on that, not a new product. This does not mean that you cannot achieve a much higher perception of value through a better product. What I'm trying to say here, don't wait until you have this new beautiful trap of a new product. You can start now if you will take that. So what is the first action? What is the first thing that a company should take? This is 100. And 100 is in a rectangular box, which means that's what you should do. Let's look on 100 carefully. Come on. 100 is the company introduces modifications to its offerings that substantially increase the perception of value for a sizable market. Not for a small niche, for a sizable market. Is it easy? No. How many functions usually are involved in such a thing? Many. You need, in order to do that, you need really to induce people. You need to give them the framework. We'll come to it later. Okay? This requires doing the analysis of the market, by effect, cause effect, building the tree, finding the core problem, building all the mafia offer, as we call it, the unrefusable offer, then selling it internally, which means to induce correctly the people, and then selling it externally and take it. What is the unavoidable result if you succeed to do it? And so many have demonstrated that it's much easier than they thought before. You get 110 as an unavoidable result. What is 110? The company finds himself in what situation? The company operates now in a sizable market in which the perception of value gives the company a decisive competitive edge, a decisive advantage. Unfortunately, most companies are saying, we made it! That's what I call the green curves comes. By the way, let's go back to the green curve. Do you know what? I'm afraid so much of the green curve. Let's have it here on the graph. Do you know what happens after that? It's not everything is peaceful. Many times after that, that's why I'm terrified of a green curve. Everything is fine, we're happy, boom. Let's go back to the tree. Once you achieve that, you are not sitting on your laurels. What is the next step after that? Let's look on 120. We've said it when we've talked about marketing. Don't do it as a first step. Your company is not ready for it. Your people and yourself don't believe that it can be done so easily. Do the first 100. After that goes to 120, which is what? Offerings are introduced in a way that guarantees practical segmentation. Remember what we talked about the segmentation? You are taking, it's not niches. You are looking at a market that looks uniform, realizing that in this market there are people or companies that has much different or higher needs than others, which means the market is segmented. We are unifying it because we are treating it as if it is uniform. Find a way to segment it. Segment in such a way that when a person with higher need is paying high price, talks with a person with lower needs that pays lower price, he does not feel cheated. He feels, of course, you paid lower because you've got something that definitely not satisfy my need. Okay? This should be the second step. Companies that try to do it the first step usually are failing. Why? They don't trust themselves that can be done. So do the 100 first, then go to 120. If you do that, what is now the unavoidable result? It's 130. There are many companies that are there already. And 130 is, the situation at that stage is, the company have introduced many market segmentations in which it has a competitive edge. Most companies are not at this stage, and those that reach it, especially when you can reach it in less than 1.5 years, and many have done it already, the chance of falling into the green curve is so high, it's unbelievable. Let's go back to the tree. You are here. Do we have by that, doing that, that's a good strategy? Not yet. Why? Strategy is talking also for the long term. What is happening? There is not infinite competitive edge. You have now the competitive edge. Don't think that the competitor is out. He is trying to catch up, and he will catch up, and then the window of opportunity closes. These things that we are talking about so far were good enough to open windows of opportunities between a year to 5 years in the past, not when this knowledge becomes more and more known. Then the window of opportunity, I believe, in the future, doing that, will shrink to something like 2 years. Strategy that all its horizon is 2 years is not enough. You have to go much beyond it. So the question starts to be, how do we create a lasting competitive edge? Minimum 10 years. How can we do it at all? Is there any way to do it? And my answer is yes. But here, you have to think very differently.
Yes, we do. There was an evolution on this red and green curve, which we will talk about it soon. So don't get distracted because of that. 1999, and the frustration exists still. Not because we implement the TOC application, we get results, we're done. There's so much more to be done. And we can then reach, and it's a great base to reach the immunization of the company for the future. If we recognize that the way to have a decisive competitive edge is to satisfy a client's significant need to an extent that no significant can, bingo, we have it. If you watch this session complete, you will see how he also goes into a beautiful concept. And he says, if the tail moves, then there is a dog. And he's saying basically, today we are operating already in these markets, and we don't pay attention that some of the customers are already screaming at us with this significant need. Those are the few ones. Some of them obnoxious. This is the tail. They're there. But if there's a tail, then there must be a dog, something much bigger, which means if we are able to identify that the dog exists there and we can satisfy that need, bingo, we have it. No surprise. In the S&T, it says clearly, strategy. A decisive competitive edge is gained by the market, knowing that the company's due date promises are remarkably reliable when all other parameters remain the same. Of course, this assumes one thing, that the market we're talking about is the one that is expressed in a necessary assumption. When the due dates of the suppliers are notoriously bad and late delivery has major consequences for the client, reliability is a client's significant need. It means clearly, if I'm going to implement the TOC application on production, it's because I want to have very high due date performance, for example. If I'm going to have a high due date performance, it's because I can accommodate myself, and I am in an environment that complies with this. And then I can make that as a satisfaction of the need that exists today in the market, making it a decisive competitive edge. So it's not to implement TOC application because now we are able to have happy customers. Yes, that's a side effect. You all have heard about the viable vision concept. We have talked right now about the decisive competitive edge. And the S&T shows that there are two elements of the decisive competitive edge. And even early 99 is referring to it. It's not enough just to build, capitalize, and sustain on the left side, my right side. There's the other element. If we can collect money, if we can make money using this, because it's segmented, which is the strategy in 2.2, on a considerable portion of the sales, high premiums are gained by the market knowing that the company can deliver in surprisingly short lead time, bingo. But take the concept out of it. We are implementing the TOC application for production, not for the sake of it. We're implementing it because we want high due date performance. We want high due date performance because we know we can operate in a market that has a significant need on high due date performance. And because the need is there, the perception of value, if we provide it, increases dramatically. And people are willing to pay for that. A pure segmentation in a seasonal market. And this is exactly what is enabling us to reach the viable vision. Immunizing the future of the company through the implementation of a TOC application. So already since 1984, Eli is showing that the concepts of TOC are not individual concepts, but are a concept that enables us to bring our companies to the blue ocean, not the red ocean. Here's where the two curves evolved. The red is the growth of the company, and the green is the stability. And there's a very close relationship between the red and the green. Because if we don't have the red one, it means that very soon we will enter a red ocean. And if we enter into a red ocean, it might be that our company is not immunized. Well, if we enter the red ocean, it is not immunized. And if it's not immunized, the probability that we will fail is high, that the company will not exist in the future exists, and therefore the stability does not exist and it goes down. Intuitively, Eli knew it. He's referring at the 8 as the red curve is the stagnation of the improvements, which is basically we are not longer in the red, which is bringing a huge threat to stability. When is stability achieved? When the company is in the blue ocean, when the company is growing, when people feel secure, when the market feels, etc., etc., etc. So enjoying both rapid and continuous growth, while at the same time, remarkably, stability regardless of external market conditions. Through the TOC applications. How are we doing with time? Not very good, as I suspected. You can do exactly what I just did with production, with any application that we have in TOC. Critical chain, I'm not going into any details. I'm just going to show you. Remember how it starts. He's saying it. In production, we don't have to look into 100. We have to look only on one, which is called the bottleneck. Focus. In projects, it's even worse. We go from 40,000 tasks to 40. 0.01%, which means the opportunity is even bigger. We know the differences. And in the book, he's showing the essence of the solution. Because there's dependencies and variability, it is critical on the way we're dealing with people. The famous show me how you measure me and I will show you how I will behave. And it's all of this concept of aggregation of uncertainty. Yes, I'm in a task. If I get delayed, the delay is moved towards the project, towards the end of the project, of course, everything gets delayed. But if I finish earlier, nobody cares about it. So all the concept of aggregation, and then of course all the concept of ensuring that we don't waste the time, all the multitasking issue. And you will see one by one again how these concepts, not applications, are presented into the S&T. Once again, from the bottom, for a reason we want to implement critical chain, not just to be proud that our projects are better than in the past, but there's an aim. We're implementing critical chain because we know that we will reach a point in which we are able to satisfy a significant need in the market. Why do we care about it? Because that's the only way that we will reach a blue ocean, and therefore immunizing the future of the company.